Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Hala Alawi, Atmosphere Press's Book Publicity and Events Manager. Thank you so much for joining us today for our free webinar, Should You Hybrid Publish? An Author's Perspective, with special guest and award-winning author Gabi Coatsworth. Gabi will be talking about her experience with hybrid publishing and whether it's something you should pursue yourself. You'll also have a chance to ask her your questions in the Q&A portion of the event. Just type your questions for Gabi in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will get to as many questions as possible. Transparency in publishing is what we're all about here at Atmosphere. Founded in 2015 by Nick Courtwright, an author and PhD in literature, Atmosphere Press is the only publisher who puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. We've published more than 1,000 books, our authors have won dozens of awards, and our books have reached the hands of tens of thousands of readers. Visit www.atmospherepress.com to learn more about how you can have a rewarding and meaningful author experience of your own, as well as to submit your manuscript for review. And if you mention this webinar in the first line of your cover letter, we will expedite the review process for your submission. Now I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker. Gabi Coatsworth is an award-winning British-born author and blogger who has spent half her life living in the United States. Her memoir, Love's Journey Home, was published by Atmosphere Press in May 2022, and her debut novel, Beginner's Guide to Starting Over, came out in April 2023. Both won first-place awards in the Connecticut Press Club, and the novel came first in the Indie Author Project Awards. She's active in her writing community, where she runs several groups and classes for writers, and you can find her by Googling her name. Let's now welcome Gabi herself.
Hi, Hala, and thank you so much for asking me to be here. I'm looking forward to this because I love talking about hybrid publishing and why it's such a good option for so many people. Would you like me to just talk about how I came to do it, or do you have some specific questions for me?
Yeah, that would be fantastic if you could just talk a little bit about your experience first, and then we'll dive into some questions from the Q&A.
Okay, well, I had a memoir ready to publish, and I knew that, at least I thought it was ready to publish, and I knew that it was very unlikely it would get published by a large publisher because, as I often say, I had not been abducted by aliens, and I hadn't, and I wasn't a celebrity. So I decided I would look around for alternative ways to publish, and I went to my next option, which was small traditional publishers, and again, they had either they didn't answer me or they did very few memoirs. I knew I could self-publish, but I also knew that I would have to learn an awful lot about the self-publishing process. And so I knew also that I didn't have time to do all of that and keep writing my next book. So I did some research, and among the options were Atmosphere Press and about 5 others that I looked at. And one of the things I did was to buy a book from each of these publishers to see what kind of quality they were going to produce. And some of them were not up to my standards, shall we say, meaning that they had typos in them, that the quality of the paper wasn't very good. For instance, you could see through the page to the other side. The covers had sometimes were bleeding, or the pages, they just didn't look good. They didn't look like a high quality product. But there were two hybrid publishers who produced very good quality books. And so I applied to them and a couple of others as backup. And I got 2 offers in the same week for my memoir. And I thought, okay. So again, I had a conversation with both of them. And one of them was very good, very nice, but they required the rights to my book for 2 years, which meant that they were in control of my book. Atmosphere, on the other hand, said, no, they don't take the rights of my book. So I own it and I can do what I want with it, really. which was very appealing. And the other thing was the royalty structure. Atmospheres was the best royalty structure that I had come across. And so I decided to go with them. And I was really glad I did, because they offered all the services really of a traditional publisher, including editing, and not just line editing, but if I had things that were wrong in there or that didn't weren't clear, especially to an American audience, because as you know, I'm British, so I sometimes will write things that Americans might not understand. So the editor would point that out to me. That would be great. And then came the exciting part of having so much input into what the book would finally look like and what it would be. And the other thing, I will get back to that. The other thing I knew was that Atmosphere had a distribution system that I couldn't possibly hope to learn if I was going to do this myself. So it wasn't going to be a case of just being on Amazon. It was going to be that my book would be available, on Barnes and Noble and Walmart and Target and other places, many places online, and bookshop.org, who I'm very fond of because they work on behalf of independent bookstores. So I went with Atmosphere and got to the exciting part where they said, would you like to send us some examples of covers of what you'd like for your memoir? So I said, sure. And I went to look online. And one thing I noticed was that the covers that drew my eye had a large title that could be read as a thumbnail, like on Amazon, for example. And they were fairly plain, but and usually the ones I liked they were not a whole photo of a couple of people wandering into the sunset or something like that. So Atmosphere came back with 16 possible versions of a book cover, which was absolutely stunning. And the book takes place somewhat in New Hampshire. So one of them was rather funny, and I don't know whether it was done deliberately, but it had a picture of a moose swimming across a lake on the front of it. So I thought, no, not that one. But this is what I ended up with. And the thing that's wonderful about this is that this photo is here, but the sort of pale grey and light grey version of it is in the background of this. And on the inside, I asked them, could they perhaps do a little, I don't know if you can see this here, a little symbolic rose at the top of the chapter headings. Everything was really done to make it look exactly as I would have wanted a big publisher to do it. I have a cousin who lives in South Africa, and he read this and he said, this was his comment, there's not a single typo in it. I said, I'll take that. And so that really increased my confidence in Atmosphere. And there was also this business of not having to buy any particular number of books. These are things that everybody should research. In fact, I've written an article for Publishers Weekly about the 7 questions you should ask a hybrid publisher, and they're based on the fact that you don't want any surprises. There are things you need to know ahead of time, and what Atmosphere does is makes it extremely clear what it is you're going to get. And in my experience, everything has happened the way they said it would. And there's always been somebody, this is the other thing that I don't know if this happens, but I don't think it necessarily does in the other kinds of publishers, but there's always somebody I can contact to say things like comments about, of course, the production of the book, but things like, do you think we could run a special offer on Amazon for a week to offer the book at a discount or something like that? And that has been brilliant because, again, something else you have to learn, you have to take a chance on. People at Atmosphere have experience of this, so they can tell you, well, it's not a good idea to do it now. How about we do it then? And so on. So all in all, I've found that the relationships that I've made with Atmosphere have been tremendous, to the point where when my agent said, everybody loves his book, and there's one person who might publish it. I had an agent looking for a traditional publisher, but she can't do it for another 2 years because she's got too many books in the pipeline. So this was my novel. And I thought, I can't wait for 2 years for this to come out. And I sent it into Atmosphere and I said, what do you think? And they said, yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll send it off to the editors. And when it comes back, in the end, it took about 9 months, which was much, much quicker than going with the traditional publisher, and actually quicker than some other hybrid publishers. And still you get the quality. And I know I sound a bit like a commercial for Atmosphere, and people who've talked to me about you do it because they know that I'm happy with Atmosphere Press, and so they'd like to know why. So I hope I've explained a little bit why, and why I think it's such a good option for people. You don't have to learn all the self-publishing stuff. You get it done in decent time. You've always got help, and the quality is likely to be better than what you can do yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gabby. Just to start off, that's a lot of great insights to be thinking over and considering, especially for a lot of prospective authors who are torn between what kind of publishing path they want to take. But at this point, speaking of prospective authors, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'd love to jump into our audience Q&A. So if you do have a question in the audience, please go ahead and type that in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. So to start off, Gabby, the first question is, how long should I keep trying for a traditional deal before I go hybrid?
Yeah, that's a bit like how long is a piece of string. So in order to publish traditionally, one of the things that takes the absolute longest is finding an agent. And I've got many author friends, writer friends actually, who aren't yet published, who spend a lot of time researching agents, querying agents, being ignored by agents. Occasionally they will find an agent, and then that agent has to sell the book to the publishers. So all in all, my book was with an agent for, I'm going to say, at least 18 months. It might have been 2 years before I decided, no, I was going to give up. And these days, I wouldn't go that route myself because it was all taking too much time. And I wanted to just hand it off to someone so that I could be writing the next book, a novel this time. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm writing the next novel while Atmosphere is handling this one. So I would say, I don't know, I'm not a very patient person and I'm not a very young person. So for me, it was quite important to see some results sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question. This person says, should I still invest in hybrid publishing even if I don't think my book will sell a lot of copies?
So the question of whether you will make money with hybrid publishing is always a tricky one. And in one thing I always remind people of is that of the big 5 traditional publishers, 96% of all the books they publish sell fewer than 2,000 copies, which is really staggering. They make all their money on the 4% that are the blockbuster things. And so my expectations were if I could sell 2,000 copies, I'd be happy. And I actually look at it I don't look at it in terms of the investment per se, because I would still be waiting to make all the money back from book sales. However, I have made more money also from other activities around writing and books because I have published books. So the prize that I got from the Indie Author Project was in the 4 figures, which was, amazing. And I'd forgotten that there was a prize when I submitted to it. So many writers make money from writing related activities rather than from actual book sales. So I would say, yes, it's an investment. It's an investment in a writing career.
Yeah, I love that distinction, especially with all the activities that could come with that. Thank you. We have got another question. Why would I use a hybrid publisher when I can just self-publish the book myself?
Yeah, and there's nothing to stop you self-publishing a book yourself, especially if you know, or you think you know exactly what you want, and you have the time to learn how to publish on Amazon, and then also how to publish wide, how to make sure that your book is available in Canada and India and England, Australia. If you've got time to do all of that, you can have the same kind of experience. But I often see in my writer chat groups online that people have problems with that, with Amazon, and there's no one to turn to. You know, KDP, which is their publishing arm, has done something with their book that they weren't aware of, and they don't know how to fix it, and they're having real trouble trying to get hold of a real person. If you're someone who likes to have actual control over your book and the team that's there supporting you, I would go for a hybrid press. Plus, not to mention the fact that it's going to cost you money to self-publish if you do it professionally. You're going to have to pay for editors and cover designers and interior designers and so on. So it's not free to self-publish. Let me just say that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's another thing that some authors don't realize with the self-publishing route, but absolutely. Another question for you. What future book projects are you personally working on right now?
Funny you should ask me. So I'm writing a sequel to this. This book had a ghost in it, and it was supposed to be a relatively minor character, but it turned out to be very popular. So I'm writing another book set in the same town, which now also has a ghost in it, different kind of ghost. So apparently this town is sort of haunted. I don't know. But I'm also writing because people responded to this one by saying, well, this covers your life from the age of like 25 onwards. What happened before that? So I've got that one also, and I'm switching between the two, and whichever one gets finished first, you guys will get.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out for that for sure. Before we move on, I just want to let the chat know, definitely keep sending in your questions, but also we are answering some of the questions in writing, so check that out in the Q&A box as well. But otherwise, moving on, Gabby, what was the actual publication process like and how long did it take?
So the publication process was that I submitted the books and crossed my fingers, and I had a reply within 2 or 3 weeks, I think, with some interest from Atmosphere and a request to have a phone call. This is much faster reply, by the way, than you would get from an agent typically. So, so I had the phone call, and I really liked what I was hearing. I could ask any questions I wanted, and I did. I asked about, pricing, how did this work, and so on, and what I would have to do from my side, what my responsibilities were, and what Atmosphere's responsibilities were, and sent it. They kept the book. They sent it to one of their editors, and they've got some very good editors, I will say. Sent it to one of their editors to check. Then they said, okay, let's do the cover. When the cover was done, they said, let's work on the inside. And once the inside was done, then the back cover happened, because you have to know how many pages you're going to end up with in order to design a cover so that the spine is the right thickness. These are things I wouldn't have thought of if I was self-publishing. Having done that, it got all exciting about getting towards publication date. And so I did a lot of my own marketing because I have a background in marketing. But Atmosphere does offer marketing services, and they're very clear about what you get and how much it costs. They're not compulsory. You can add them on at any point in the process. So I was preparing for that. I ordered books. I sent them out to people who might review them, and then I had my launch, which was very nice. So that was my publishing process. It took about 9 months from the day I signed the contract, and that worked out perfectly for me. In fact, I published on Shakespeare's birthday, which is next Tuesday. My novel was published on Shakespeare's, optimistically hoping I'd be almost as good as the Bard, not quite.
What a perfect coincidence, or maybe it was intentional. I shouldn't assume
It
it's a
was sort of
coincidence, but
intentional.
okay, yeah, I love it. Um, Next question for you. How much of your manuscript has to be done before you submit it to Atmosphere? And how much editing help after that point did you get as part of the process?
So in my case, I sent completed manuscripts, and in fact, I had had them edited by a professional editor before I sent them in, partly because that was the only way I knew I was going to be able to send them to anywhere else. If I sent a partially written book to an agent or a traditional publisher, they wouldn't even look at it. Now I think Atmosphere has changed its policy slightly on that, but I did have some editors because I'd had a really good editor for my memoir. There was very little that needed to be changed, thankfully. I had two editors for a beginner's guide to starting over that I'd paid to do this, another cost, but I was assigned a really good editor of yours, and she had, I think, worked for a publisher before as an editor, a traditional publisher, and she came up with a couple of good ideas, which at first I went, really? Really? You think I should do this? And I was like, no. But she was right, and that made it into a better book. And then, of course, there are the line editors who check the spelling and the grammar, and then there are the people who do the proofreading. And I proofread it myself because you should, even with a traditional publisher.
Absolutely. And speaking of all these editors, do you recommend using an editor before using Atmosphere to get the manuscript to the best version for the actual publisher submission?
I did because I didn't know to begin with that I was going to be going with Atmosphere. I was hoping for a traditional publisher. And I think I still would because I like to sort of cover all the bases and hopefully have it in near perfect condition. But you may know this better than I, Haley. What's the policy now? I think if you have an outline and three-quarters of the book or something, you can send it in. You should tell us what that is. I don't know exactly. I would always
Right.
send in the whole thing, but
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct about that. And some authors do elect to work with an editor before submitting to Atmosphere, especially if they are having just a partial part of the manuscript before that submission. But it's not necessarily, well, it's not necessary, I guess, is what I'm getting at. So it's kind of up to the author's preference and how much of the editing work they want to do between the submission and publication, because that can make that process take a little bit longer.
yeah, I would
Um,
think so. And I've one thing I always like to do is I like the quality of the writing to be as good as it can be, because if it's not great quality writing, some things you can fix with editing. Atmosphere can fix with editing, but I'm sure there are books where you think this is going to be so much work for that person that they really need to finish it and come back with it. And I know you don't accept every submission that you get because you do have a standard of writing that you are looking for.
Absolutely correct. All right, so we have another question for you, Gabby. For both of your books that you published with Atmosphere, did you keep the rights to them? I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but just some more from you.
I did keep the rights on them, and apropos of that, I decided I would like to record my own audiobook. This is something else that Atmosphere does. You can do your audiobook with them. That again is a separate kind of project. But I wanted to record it myself because it was a memoir. And I have not had my novel recorded yet, and I may come back to you and talk to you about that. But yeah, I kept the rights. If I had decided, for example, to take my audiobook and give it to Meryl Streep to read, I could have done that without checking in with you guys. So no, I own the rights. And so if I decided to go away and change the cover or reprint it on pink paper or who knows what, I could do that.
Yes. I just have to say, I love a memoir that's narrated by the author themselves. It's really an important element of that, I think. But this is another question, a little bit different, but what has been your favorite part of being a published author?
Oh, the absolutely favorite part, I think, is meeting readers. I never know how people, with a memoir especially, you never know how people are going to react to your book. And in this one, the variety of things that people related to, from childcare in the 1970s to looking after my husband in the 20 somethings, was very varied. And there was one woman, quick story, quick. I walked into my dentist's office and a hygienist I didn't know came up and said, "Are you Gabi Coatsworth?" And I'm like, "Yes, fabulous." And she said, "Because I loved your book." And I said, "Which one?" She said, "The memoir, I could really relate to it." And I said, "That's fabulous." She said, "Yes, all that driving you did up and down to New Hampshire." And I felt slightly crushed, but I thought, it's whatever resonates with the reader. And of course, the readers were giving me other feedback too, which was really lovely. And the same with the novel. Just to meet people who say, "Yes, I liked it," and you feel, yeah, it was really worth publishing.
Yeah, oh, I'm so happy to hear about those little anecdotes about connecting with readers. This person says, if someone wants to take the next step with their manuscript, whether they're completely new to Atmosphere or have already been offered a contract, what should they do next?
Well, if I were you, having checked other places, and this is nothing bad about Atmosphere at all, but I think you will feel very good if you check some other places and realize which of these will be the one you want to submit to. And then I think submit it and see what you'll get is you'll get feedback, no matter which way it goes. And you've got nothing to lose by submitting. It doesn't cost you anything to submit. Atmosphere has got some great readers, and so I would, and terrific editors if you need them. So that's the way I would go. Make it as good as you can. If it's not quite finished, send it in for some feedback. Like, is this a story that you would be interested in? And can I get back to you when it's done, sort of thing. And you'll get an answer for that as well.
Yeah, it's never, it doesn't hurt to reach out and ask people for things like that.
Right, right.
For sure. This person says the cover is so important in the book's construction. Any thoughts on the best way to get a good quality job done?
So yes, first of all, look at other people's covers in your genre. What you don't want is to have a cover that looks like the Bible if you're writing erotic literature. So pick some examples, and Atmosphere will ask you to do this. Pick some covers that you like and that work in your genre. As I've already said, big title, interesting graphic. I've had many compliments on both of the covers that I've had from Atmosphere, and they are so different because they are designed to fit the actual genre that they're in. People do love this. They love both of them. So you can look at getting your own cover done if you really want to. You don't need to with Atmosphere, of course, but Atmosphere will give you feedback, and I can tell you how many little tweaks I asked for, and there was never a complaint from the art department, although they may have been tearing their hair out for all I know, but they were always impeccably polite and got back to me fast with, "What about this? Do you think this is going to work?" Until finally, and I think this one had the novel, they came back with 4 different colors of cover with the same design. And I showed it to my friends and said, "What do you think?" And so this blue one was the one that we ended up with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they both look beautiful, so I'm happy the process was just as enjoyable. This is a really great question. I think it's really important. What did you put in your query letter to Atmosphere?
I recall I filled out a submissions form, which, by the way, made it incredibly much easier than submitting to a traditional publisher, where the agonies over a query letter never sort of stop. Atmosphere asks you for a brief description of the book so that I guess they can figure out which genre you might be in and so on, and give it to the right reader. But you do not have to put everything in there. You don't have to come up with the log line. You don't have to get that perfect. You need to convey something about your book. They don't require even the whole back cover copy. They don't require that. They need to know a little bit about it. They'd like to know your bio, of course, which anybody who's publishing anything would like to know. And that essentially is it, as I remember it. If you are now taking query letters, you're not, are you? You don't require a separate query letter, do you?
Right, it's just part of the cover letter submission, so it's a little bit different, but
Well, yeah, and I think mine was just an email that said, here's my manuscript. This is what it's about. It's this long, says 90,000 words, and this is what the story is about. It was quite factual, and I didn't worry too much about having to impress them because I knew somebody was going to read it. It wasn't immediately going to go into a slush pile. That's a big difference from sending it to a traditional publisher.
yeah, definitely. There's huge difference with that amount for sure. Um, I just want to jump in quickly to say we were planning to be finished now, but we have a lot of great questions, so we're just going to have time for a few of them, so we can make sure we can hear as much as possible from you, Gabby. So with that said, this person wants to know your opinion on why you think the traditional publishing model is becoming less attractive to prospective authors, especially if something changed or just any thoughts about that.
I think the thing that's changed is that traditional publishers don't take as many risks as they used to. It's much harder to get in unless you can show that you're going to sell dozens of copies. If you're a celebrity, they know people are going to buy your memoir or your novel because you've already got a huge audience of people who are likely to take a look at it even. But so there's that. There are many fewer risks being taken. The smaller traditional publishers are willing to take slightly more risks, but not that many, and they usually don't pay an advance. If they do, it's likely to be, maybe $500 or something as a sort of token thing. And with all of these things, you have to do your own promotion and marketing. So I think that and the other thing is that things like hybrid publishing didn't really exist 10 years ago. Well, just about, they used to be called vanity presses. They would publish anything. They'd give you a leather cover and you'd give it to your family and friends, and that was it. It wasn't like publishing for the public. And by the way, you can order an Atmosphere book from any bookstore. They will order it for you, which is another huge advantage. Something that the old vanity presses didn't even bother with. They didn't bother with distribution. It wasn't a thing. So, yeah, I think that's the big change. There are so many more options.
Hmm. This person says, I'm English and I know that my unpublished novel is very English in locations, characters, speech patterns, etc. I really don't want it rewritten for a North American readership, so I'd be very pleased to hear more of Gabby's experience on this issue.
Okay, so I do write with a British accent, I will say, and I warn people of that. That's why I mentioned that I'm British. But I will say, to be fair, that there are some British hybrid publishers also that are worth researching. You need to research very carefully because among the so-called hybrid publishers are some total rip-off artists. And there is an organization called the Association of Independent Authors, I think, ALLI. They have a chart that rates publishers and that flags some that have had problems. And you have to be careful with any of these. Atmosphere is great, of course, but if you really feel that it's going to be awkward for an American audience, you could try that. The other thing you should try is giving it to some Americans to read. Americans who you don't know, who don't know what you're trying to say, and see what the reaction is before you move it along.
Yeah, definitely. Those outside opinions, I think, can always be really helpful from, trusted individuals. So, definitely something to explore. We just have time for one more question, Gabby. So this is, what is the one key thing an author can do to make sure they're happy with their publishing experience?
I actually think that having some control over your publishing experience is the thing that I consider to be important. And it's not because I'm a control freak. It's because the last thing I want is to have, I now know this has happened to people, small traditional publishers who've simply said, we're changing the title. This is what the cover's going to be. And you just have to take it and go with it. So I like, that's the thing that I look for, is that people will listen to me because I talk all the time. No, because I want someone to say, well, that sounds like a good idea. Let's see what we can do with it, rather than, sorry, no, it's out of your hands now. You've given it to us. We own the rights. We can do what we want. And that's something that I find um, discouraging, shall we say.
Absolutely. I think just what you said, the control element, it's really huge. And I think it really gives a lot of authors a sense of security that's really important when you're talking about your artwork, and putting that into the world. So at this point, that's all the questions that we have time for today. But if you do have a question that wasn't answered, please check out Atmosphere Press's website, where we have more wisdom and experience from our publishing professionals and our authors. That being said, thank you again so much to Gabi Coatsworth for sharing your experience, your time, your wisdom here today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us and for your really thoughtful questions. If you're a writer looking for a rewarding and meaningful publishing experience, go ahead and check out those links in the chat and visit us at atmospherepress.com. On the website, you can sign up for our email newsletter, browse our new and forthcoming releases, meet the humans behind Atmosphere Press, check out our testimonials, and of course, submit your manuscript. Remember to mention this webinar in the first line of your cover letter, and we will expedite the review process for your submission. We look forward to staying in touch with all of you, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, have a great rest of your week, everyone.